My name is Stephen Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and I'm on the Board of Directors for Floridians for Solar Choice. Appreciate everybody joining us today. We have several different things we're going to talk about over the course of the press conference, but let me just make some opening and some framing remarks. First, it was about a year ago that we were standing in this room when we launched this coalition. The coalition was made up of business interests, both in the solar industry and also people in the business community that can benefit from solar power. It was made up of free market champions from across the political spectrum, and it was made up of environmental and progressive interests that wanted to see more clean energy. We were very pleased with how the coalition grew. Matter of fact, it has now grown to be over 70 organizations. We have literally thousands of volunteers and tens of thousands of people that have worked with us to help move this coalition forward. We were very pleased with the speed at which the coalition grew and the momentum that it built. And indeed, as we talked about several times, the monopoly utilities led by FP&L, Duke Energy, Tampa Electric, and Gulf Power began to interfere with our efforts repeatedly. And they eventually, over the course of the summer, launched a counter ballot that was, in essence, a blocking amendment. They usually called it Smart Solar, when indeed it was primarily geared at deception and misleading people. And they began to interfere every single turn they could with what citizens were trying to do. They interfered by bringing in the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. They interfered with the timing of the Supreme Court. They filed multiple briefs and brought proxy groups in to bring briefs. And they have then ran this incredible form of deception against what we did. But I'm here to tell you today that this coalition is strong and growing stronger. While we will not make it on the 2016 ballot, we are seriously looking at the strategic opportunity to put it on the 2018 ballot. The signatures that have been gathered, we have over 450,000 signatures that have been gathered. They are good for 24 months. So that preserves the option for us to look seriously at the 2018 ballot. But more importantly, our coalition at the onset was committed to building a broad set of solar policies that could grow the solar industry. And we remain committed to that. All the members of our coalition have indicated that they are committed to opening the market in Florida and continuing to grow the solar market in Florida. So our coalition is not going away. Today is the day that legal briefs are to be filed in opposition to the utilities deception campaign that they've run under the name of Smart Solar. And so what we're going to do is introduce you to several of the legal experts that are going to give you insight into why we believe that the Supreme Court will not allow this deception to go forward. This is critically important because the more the utilities try to hold the citizens of Florida back from getting what they want, the stronger we get. The more they have tried to use deception to mislead people, the stronger we get. One good thing I can assure you is that over the past year, over 1.5 million Floridians have signed a piece of paper thinking that they were encouraging the promotion of solar energy. Unfortunately, lots of that was a deception campaign that was run by the utilities. They did not let the people know the details of what they were signing. But we are proud of what has happened over the past year, and we look forward to what we're going to be doing going forward. And again, we get stronger every single day. So with that, let me introduce Bill Garner and Bob Neighbors to come up. They're going to be representing the full coalition, Floridians for Solar Choice, in the opposition brief, and they'll give you just some highlights of the brief that will be filed today.
Thanks, Stephen. My name is Bill Garner. I'm with the law firm Neighbors, Giblin and Nickerson, and with me is Bob Neighbors, who is the name on the plate. That's the firm. He's the lawyer who delivered the oral argument in the last case. It was before the Supreme Court, and will do so in the case coming up. With respect to the Smart Solar brief, the scope of the Supreme Court's review in cases like these is very narrow. The court determines whether the proposed amendment meets constitutional requirement that it embrace only a single subject, and it will consider the accuracy of the ballot title and summary describing the amendment to the voters. The Utilities Amendment has three separate parts that are not connected to one another. They don't advance a single purpose, and so it fails to meet the constitutional requirement that citizens' initiatives embrace only a single subject. More important, though, the ballot summary misleads voters. The Supreme Court's cases say that ballot language, like that used here, in this case, is misleading because it creates a false impression and because it causes the amendment to fly under false colors, leaving the voter uninformed about the true consequences of the amendment. The summary creates a false impression for voters that the amendment is necessary to create new rights when those rights are already granted by current constitutional provisions and the law. The summary does this by claiming that the amendment establishes the constitutional right for consumers to own or lease solar equipment making electricity for them on their own property. Of course, Floridians already have this right and this ability under the Constitution and the laws of the state. The amendment also flies under false colors because the ballot title suggests that the amendment has to do with a consumer's solar energy choice. In fact, the ballot title says rights relating to solar energy choice. Because the amendment merely enshrines current law into the Florida Constitution, it offers no choice at all. The voter can vote against the amendment to preserve the status quo, or the voter can vote for the amendment to preserve the status quo. The amendment would change nothing. It has nothing to do with solar energy choice. And I believe that Bob has looked very hard for the choice and hasn't been able to find one.
We keep looking for it. If anybody finds it, we'd like to have it before we file our brief.
So, based on those infirmities, we're confident the Supreme Court, based on its past cases, will not approve the Utilities Amendment for this amendment to appear on the ballot.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And they'll be around for questions, so we'll hold the questions until that time. Next, let me introduce Mike Anthile, who is with the Executive Director of the Florida Solar Energy Industries Association, and Leon is here. So Leon, come on up to the mic. Thanks.
Oh, hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Anthile. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Solar Energy Industries Association, FLASIA. We are the voice of the solar industry. We are the solar businesses across Florida. We are the job creators here in the state. We believe that the potential for affordable rooftop solar in Florida is greater than it ever has been. One thing that this campaign, our campaign, Floridians for Solar Choice, has made very clear is the lengths at which the monopoly utilities are willing to go to interfere with the growth of the solar market, the rooftop solar market. We think it's very unfortunate that the utilities are not listening to their customers, but nevertheless, we continue to fight. The solar industry will continue to fight for choice for customers in the state, and will fight for a fair and competitive marketplace in the state of Florida. And not only that, we do so with the support of a very clearly built, vast and diverse army of grassroots supporters at our back. So again, we are the ones that bring the jobs and the economic growth to Florida. We're committed to finding good policies that will advance more solar development in the state. It is very important that we don't let this interference from the monopoly utilities hinder these efforts. Their interference with Floridians for Solar Choice is a good example of just how far they can go and what the resources that they have can do to interfere with a good amendment such as ours. But we'll be standing steadfast. We've filed an opposition brief against the deceptive amendment in the Supreme Court. An amendment, the utility-backed amendment, worth noting that there is no solar businesses in Florida or in the country that are supporting this deceptive utility-backed amendment. So we're very excited to be working with former Public Service Commission Chair Leon Jacobs. If you would, Mr. Chairman, why don't you take it from here?
Long time since I had that title. But it is a pleasure to be here today to I think really endorse and support the future of Florida. It's an unfortunate reality that the industry has viewed the presence, the prominence of solar as a threat to its business model. And so they've undertaken some very, I believe, disingenuous methods to try and defeat solar. One of which is this magic thing they call a subsidy. This is a very disingenuous and I think superfluous argument that's being raised. And we hope to pierce through that, bring some clarity, to bring some light of day to the idea that really what we have here is a watershed moment, that Floridians can really be coming to the mainstream of the rest of the country. The rest of the country is beginning to see the benefits on an economic and a personal basis of using solar. And these arguments are being put forward specifically that if the customer uses solar, he imposes some kind of harm to the rest of the users and ratepayers as a whole. Is absolutely incorrect. And we hope to now bring some clarity and some light to show that this really is a moment where consumers have the opportunity to exercise the greatest benefit from using solar in the Sunshine State. So we're happy to join with this important contingent and working with FACIA. We hope to see the court agree with us. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, I want to introduce Bradley Marshall, who is the Associate Attorney with Earth Justice, and they are also going to be filing a brief.
Good morning. My name is Bradley Marshall, and I'm an Associate Attorney with the Earth Justice Law Firm. We are filing a brief on behalf of Progress Florida, Environment Florida, and the Environmental Confederation of Southwest Florida in the Florida Supreme Court against this utility-sponsored amendment because we believe this amendment is bad for consumers and bad for Florida's environment. Our interest is in a cleaner Florida, and solar is critical to getting us there. We all know that the dirty energy we've been relying on for decades is polluting our air and destroying our water. So it's critical to increase everyone's access to clean solar energy. This amendment would make growing the solar industry harder and would hurt consumers. We think that the ballot summary is deceptive. It sounds like it's going to encourage the use of rooftop solar, but it does the opposite because it would authorize rates that discriminate against solar users. Our analysis indicates that if this amendment passed, homeowners who use solar would likely have to pay higher rates when they buy electricity off of the solar grid. Those rates eventually would be as much as double the normal rate. That simply isn't fair. We want increased solar energy in the state to get us away from dirty fuel, but this deceptive amendment is definitely not the way to do that. That's why we'll be representing citizen groups at the state Supreme Court to try to prevent this deception from getting on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. And next I want to introduce Tori Perfetti, who is with Conservatives for Energy Freedom and is the chair of Floridians for Solar Choice.
Good afternoon, and as was already stated, I'm Tori Perfetti, Chairman of Floridians for Solar Choice. I'd like to obviously thank everybody for being here, including everyone here in the audience, press included. And look, we're not going to carry this too much further. We're going to stay here for question and answers, but I do want to point out something that I think happens a lot of times in politics. You have a starting point when a coalition or a bill is proposed, an individual runs for office. And that starting point exists, and the context of when that begins at that moment could mean a lot of different things. And with our campaign, I think people are forgetting how the language of opening up Florida's energy market actually existed. A year ago, roughly, in this state, there were individual representatives who will publicly and have publicly stated that doors would be slammed on them if they had proposed even minor legislative fixes to Florida's energy market. Today, you have individuals from the right and the left proposing legislation on a multiple fronts regarding opening up Florida's energy policy. That is a huge, huge first in this state. At least it's a first for me to see. And I think the other thing that's very interesting is where the language existed with citizens of Florida. How many people that I have run into, and everybody in this group has run into, that had no idea how closed off the market was here. You know, people turn their lights on and they go, oh, wow, great, it works. Maybe you hurricane comes in, the lights don't work, someone calls up someone else on the phone, they yell a lot, and the lights come back on maybe in a week. But nobody really thinks too much about it. However, the citizens of Florida have now seen, as Mike had pointed out, how far the utilities will go to stop an open energy market that removes a monopolized captive rate base. But we can also see exactly how far we still need to go in the third largest state in the nation, as well as the third largest for solar capacity. So I think it is extremely important that as everybody is continuing to follow this story, write about this story, that everybody realize just how far we have come, not only legislatively, not only regarding conservative and liberal groups, not only regarding business associations and groups in the state, but also the citizens. So with that, I don't believe we have anything else.
I want to introduce some of the others. So I wanted to take just a minute and introduce a couple of folks that are also members of the coalition that are here. We've got a strong contingent from the League of Women Voters who have been phenomenal in working on this. Kathy Wynn, the president, is here standing with us. We have Catherine Baird, who's the chair of the Tea Party Network. Been very strong supporters working across the political spectrum. We have John Hedrick, who's with Democracy Environmental Caucus of Florida. Thank you for joining us. And then everyone knows Susan Glickman, who is strong, been working with us, working on a lot of the issues here in Tallahassee with the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy and been a key part of the coalition. And am I missing anyone? But again, I want to thank. So at this point, let me just say in summary, clearly we're disappointed that we're not getting on the 2016 ballot, but we are absolutely committed to keeping the coalition going, and our goal is to move forward on solar policy. We are looking seriously at 2018. We will stop this sham, deceptive campaign from getting on the ballot, which is this smart solar deception that the utilities are perpetuating. We believe that they have fatal flaws in their legal arguments. We can get into more detail on that. And we look forward to the beginning of this legislative session because we think there is a new energy and invigoration around opening the solar market. We think there's lots of opportunities with a number of both direct legislation and then also the possibility of actually having a tax abatement issue on the ballot in 2016. We think all those are critical. So with that, let me open it up for questions. Anybody?
If the opposing measure really doesn't make any difference, it won't change anything, why expend resources to fight it in court?
Well, one of the key worries we have is one, it's deception. First and foremost, they've run a campaign that's completely misled voters about what's really happening. So people think that if they vote for this, they're actually getting something that they really aren't. And so that's just wrong. The next thing is there is language in there about subsidies and that are not factually based. And we're afraid that if that language gets into the Constitution, that the utilities may try to drive a truck through there, so to speak, where they try to overemphasize misleading information. So we think the proper venue for that is a discussion with both the legislature and the Public Service Commission, and to put misleading information about subsidization in the Constitution makes no sense. So we're going to vigorously oppose it.
If that language gets in the Constitution, does it prevent your amendment from even getting on the ballot? I mean, your amendment might then in the future not be constitutional.
I don't think that we've seen a legal opinion that way at all. I think there is some question about what may happen, but I don't think we have. Does anybody want to take that on?
I mean, one of the difficulties of this question and that is that a stated purpose is to kill our amendment. I mean, one of the things that it is true that if that amendment passed, I think our amendment, but both passed, we could still do what we want to do because theirs basically is a status quo amendment. The difficulty is they've said clearly that they want to try to have another competing proposal so they can, neither one can get 65%, so they can kill ours. So the strategy is designed not to do anything positive for solar energy because it just creates a status quo. It's designed to confuse the voter so the voter won't know which to vote for and thereby split the vote and neither one will get the required 60%.
But can you have both of these amendments in the Constitution? One that says you can't have subsidies and you can't have people paying for something else, and then another one.
courts would have to construe it. We think ours will survive.
And remember, within our amendment, our actual amendment, there are no subsidies in our amendment. We don't require subsidies. So what? Again, it's the deception that exists within the language of CSS is that they're attempting to create an environment where they're trying to create a fact. And those facts are absolutely baseless. They have nothing that goes behind that. Anyone who reads our amendment with the Floridians for Solar Choice Amendment will see there are no mandates and no subsidies. So all they're doing is trying to create a right that already exists in Florida, confuse voters, and then try to create other types of issues that don't exist currently.
You can see what I'm saying. If you were sitting down and saying, how can I kill our proposal, one of the things you could say, well, let's put a competing proposition that does nothing, and thereby split the solar vote. Well, people would think they had to vote for one or the other. And so the problem we're facing is going to face is a political argument as much as anything. But if they're the thing that we're dependent upon the press to look at is to look at the essence of what they're proposing, and there's no choice offered. You can't find a choice anywhere. And secondly, it's intended to return things to the status quo.
Can I just have one? Yeah. So it's a very real risk that you're going to hold the Constitution hostage to this very unclear, nebulous kind of a discussion. The issue of rate subsidization is a deep controversy even among accountants and lawyers in the public utility field. So there's no way you're going to have it rationally imposed or even implemented if you put it into constitutional language. It is absolutely fact-based, absolutely situation-based, and actually requires a rate case before you can even have a conversation about it.
And let me just add from the political context of this. This isn't the first time this playbook of using a Trojan horse constitutional amendment has been tried. It was done during the Amendment 4 campaign to potentially compete against what then was known as hometown democracy. Now, what was interesting there is that their amendment also wouldn't do much of anything, but they, for whatever their strategic game was, they never ended up putting that on the ballot. So this might be an interesting thing. They may get their signatures, but for whatever their strategic point, they may not follow through and file it. Now, they may do that, but I know we have to prepare for that. That's just another political calculus that we have to deal with in this whole thing. This has been done before, and if they go through with it, we'll just have to fight it, defeat it, and hopefully get where we really need to be.
Dr. Smith, I wanted to ask you, there have been a lot of complaints about, basically, they messed with your ground game, your collection process, sabotaging it. Can you go over what did the utilities do that made it tougher for you to get the signatures?
Well, let me be very clear. First thing they did was they launched this ballot effort. Then, which again does nothing. Then they actually went out and, in the realm of paid signature gatherers, they began to put people into the street who would literally represent themselves. We have evidence, represent themselves as being aligned with us, but they were collecting petitions. They were carrying both. They were being paid more. So part of their game was to drive the cost up on each signature. So we started at one price, and every time we moved up to try to stay competitive, they would double what we did. And because they had literally millions of dollars, they've spent over close to $6 million, and the other filing will come out tonight or tomorrow. So we'll see how many other millions they've spent. But they literally kept paying more in the street. They were having people represent themselves as being for choice, when indeed they were actually doing signatures for the utilities. And then they put out all kinds of information on the street, misinformation about what ours would do, and interfered right and left with what was happening. So it was John Sawinski was the force behind this, coming out of Orlando. He basically was hired and paid to do this. Their number one intention was to do nothing but block us from getting on the ballot. And that is, again, as I said earlier, the more they hold us back, the stronger we're going to get. And we believe that these policies will move forward ultimately.
I might add,
Bill Garner directly, let me ask Bill Garner directly respond to that. Is there any kind of, maybe dumb question, tortious interference cause of action that can be brought against the other committee for interfering with your efforts?
We have to look into that.
Well, I mean, you have to look into it, but just off the top of your head, could there be any kind of cause of action that could be created based on the facts that he's just laid out?
Well, I mean, Brad, you're in the area of of that and then develop a court case. By the time you had it resolved in the court, the issue would be struck in the political debate. I mean, one of the things that is frustrating about this is that a voter, when it goes in the ballot box, is in a very lonely place. The only thing the voter has is the ballot title in the ballot language. It has nothing else. It has to look at that and say, what is my vote going to be cast for? And so that's why these rules are created, so that that voter is not misled, and that those documents he has are correct. And what they've done is in every instance, they've misled that voter as to what they're going to be voting on. With the strategy politically to split the vote, have nobody win, and they would be happy.
I might add that your client's resources are best used on pursuing the evidence.
Educating the voter rather than changing quarrels.
I might add that John Sawicki was involved in the anti-amendment 4 efforts, so we've seen some of his playbook before.
And let me say one other thing in response to this that has been reported in the press that is actually false. One of the things that happened was we had paid signature gathering, and we needed to do that. We have a tremendous base of volunteers. They've done a phenomenal job. But to get 683,000 signatures, you have to have some paid signature gatherers. We had a firm called PCI that has done a number of the things. We hired them. We worked with them all the way up until November 19th. One of the toughest decisions I had to make in my life was when we turned them off from the paid signature gathering. Okay? We knew at that point that we had to still be getting 40 or 50,000 signatures a week. And so we continued to rely heavily on the volunteers, but we knew it was going to be very tough at that point. When we got the final invoice from PCI, there was an overcharge, and we got into a contract dispute with them. But let me be absolutely clear. It was not the contract dispute with PCI that led to us not getting on the ballot. Okay? That has been reported, which is absolutely false. We turned off the paid signature gathering because the utilities, through their deception campaign, had raised the cost so high on what it would take for us to gather each individual signature that we could not keep that going. So it was not the contract dispute, it was deception that led to where we were having to raise so much money per signature that we had to stop that. So I just want to get the record straight on that. We will get those signatures unlocked. The contract dispute is not a big deal. We will work through that, but it is not the reason why we did not get on the 2016 ballot, because we didn't even get that bill until into December, and we had already turned off the signature gathering, which at some level sealed our fate, because we knew that the volunteers were going to have a hard time hitting the same kind of numbers. But we continued to work through the month of December the best we could, and we've done the best we can, and now we think we have about 450,000 valid signatures, good for 24 months, so 18 is still a very viable option for us.
What's the most you paid for signatures?
Let me get with you after that. Any other
What
questions?
would it been, and what did it go to? Did it go from $1 signature to
It
$5?
was roughly down towards the dollar margin at first when you started, and was drifting over towards, well,
Yeah, I mean, when you figure all the costs
all the
in,
expenses.
it could be as high as, $5 or $6 a signature.
Well, and look, I just want, especially also just a reminder, when people do write this story, when we first started this campaign, one of the deception-oriented talking points was that we were using the Constitution for a carve-out, which is ridiculous. When you don't have a mandate, you don't have a subsidy. However, now you have a campaign in CSS that is using the Constitution not for any good political will, but is using the Constitution to do nothing but simply thwart FSC. Now, when you talk about the type of politics and the games that are played within it, I want you to just really think about that. Using all the money that you have, that they can bring to bear, to use the constitutional amendment process, which really, in theory, exists for the people when your legislature either is not listening or something is not happening. The people then have their say. That's what a constitutional amendment by the people exists for. You now have an organization using that process, which is a sacred process, to a specific political end for protecting a monopolized industry with a captive rate base. So I want you to just understand that when you're talking about the deception campaign and how the games have been played, you're talking about using a constitutional process that exists for the people to enact policy change with a very high bar, mind you, 60+% on top of Supreme Court review, on top of the amount of signatures. It is a very sacred process that has a high threshold that is being utilized for political aims without any virtuousness behind it.
Would you all have gotten on the ballot except for,
Hold on a second.
That's okay. You can follow.
All right, go ahead.
would you all have gotten on the ballot except for the price of the signature being raised? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. We had one of the best, and still have one of the best executed campaigns that have been done in the state on building that. We had a tremendous coalition. We have never seen such a broad group of folks.
Could you just not afford the signatures then at that point?
It just got to be where the goalposts kept moving, because every time that we were trying to mobilize to hit the numbers necessary, the price would have to go up, because the utilities were basically checking us. Every time we went up, they were going up. And this was very calculated and very intentional on their part, because they wanted their signature gatherers who had both petitions, they wanted them to give CSS to the voter first, even though they were wearing a t-shirt saying Floridians for Solar Choice, or were standing beside a Floridians for Solar Choice, and those signature gatherers were motivated because they were getting paid more money per signature. Therefore, for us to try to compete with that and increase the price, became increasingly too expensive for us to do that. Kristen?
So, Stephen, we've talked about this before. You had originally said you're here with this because nothing's been done in the legislature, and the utilities have argued that every time they've tried to do something related to solar, they've specifically called you guys out as standing in the way. So you're back here again. There's at least one third-party initiative bill that's been filed. Is there any appetite for discussion, or is the argument and dispute from the ballot initiative spilling into getting anything done now?
Well, let me say this. I believe that the elected officials of Florida are smart and they're paying attention. They have seen that over 1 million people in the state of Florida have signed a piece of paper wanting to see more solar in the state. They have seen a tremendous outcrying of editorial support from around the state. They have seen a lot of education going on for constituents. So there are two things in the legislature that are potentially viable. One is there is the tangible personal property tax and commercial property tax reform that is moving through joint resolution that could actually put a vote on the ballot in 2016 for citizens to actually support lowering the overall cost associated with solar. We think that's a wonderful thing. We think that's broad, and we think that Senator Brandeis and Representative Rodriguez deserve tremendous credit for moving that forward. There is also a third-party bill that is pending. I'll let Tori talk a little bit about that.
So there is a committee hearing regarding the actual tax abatement today at 1:30, and I think many of us will be there representing organizations that we also wear hats with. Myself as Conservatives for Energy Freedom, and Stephen would say, and Mike Felicia. You also have the third-party sales bill. So HB 687, which is by Costello, and then SB 1328 by Altman. And I think what's, again, as I had mentioned earlier, what's interesting is that I've heard, the utilities call out SACE or Stephen directly saying that they've been thwarting third-party bills. But here's the thing. You can say third-party bill, and if you're not paying attention, which a lot of people aren't going to pay attention to the nuance of what is inside a bill. Okay, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, we support a third-party bill. Well, what's in the bill? How much garbage has been thrown in a bill? How many things have been thrown out there through amendments? So there has always been a 100% open invitation from our side, from conservatives, from liberals, to sit down and discuss what will be a benefit to the businesses and citizens of Florida regarding third-party legislation. There is absolutely nobody that I have spoken to on our side, from all the different facets of our side, that would be against a legislative fix, which is, however, a proper legislative fix, not a legislative fix which makes it completely untenable to have solar after you've purchased it on your roof. You will have a lot of poison pills, a lot of things that will degrade the capability of individuals who purchase solar, even though it might be called a third-party bill. And that's some of the things that have happened before. So there is, yes.
The Altman-Costello bill that you refer to, is that a clean bill as it stands?
Well, we're taking a look at everything as well. But yeah.
Well, there is a provision about climate change that has nothing to do with solar directly that needs to be stripped out.
And
Yes, but I think the
anyway,
other
yes.
elements of that actually mirror fairly closely the ballot language, and so we are cautiously optimistic. But it is going through the legislative process where the Christmas tree ornaments, the amendments gets on, and that's where a poison
So I
pill
asked
could.
Speaker Crisafulli about this specifically. First of all, Representative Costello told me he was going to take out the
Yes.
voting change.
Yes.
But then Speaker Crisafulli said that he doesn't support the Costello-Altman bill the way it is right now. And he significantly talked about the cost of the grid and all that subsidy argument. So it's pretty clear to me that the leadership is not in support of this proposal. So do you think it's even got a chance this session?
I think it's hard to say, but I think that there is still some education that needs to happen. The utilities continue to put out misleading information about what solar actually does for the grid, and so we need to continue to address that. And so this legislative session would be a good opportunity to do it. Whether we can get all the leadership addressed, I don't know. I would say that I'm more optimistic about the tangible personal property tax. I think it's already moved through a significant number of committees, and as was said, there's another committee stop today. I think it is the thing that has the higher probability, although we need to make sure that the utilities don't interfere there. If they truly are not against solar, why would they be against allowing some tax abatement? The third party, they're arguing for these other arguments. There may need to be some more work done.
It's been however, and I think more education is probably putting it correctly, but considering where we've come, I think that there has been some tremendous steps forward, and legislatively there is optimism pushing forward as we go into this session. Hopefully, the argument will continue to go away that has been made that's incorrect, which is the harming of the grid and these arguments that the utilities created. I'm sure with very, very, very well-paid consultants who polled on things of that nature, but the facts behind it are not there. So a lot of the arguments that are usually made against third-party bills come, I think, more from the what's going to work politically and sound the best, as opposed to what is factually based.
Mary Ellen, I'd like to respond to one thing about the question. One of the very big wins for the Solar Choice Amendment is the fact that State Representative Fred Costello, a Republican from Ormond Beach, read both initiatives, and he thought it would be incredibly harmful to do what the utilities were proposing to enshrine current law in the Florida Constitution, and that's why that bill was filed in the first place. So it has yet to be scheduled for a committee meeting, and of course, Senator Altman's bill has yet to be referenced because that was just filed. But I think that is a huge win, and Tori was inferring this earlier, that is changing the dialogue when you have a Republican lawmaker filing a bill on third-party sales. That is not something that we have seen before. So it's very important, and that is a positive result of the Solar Choice Amendment and this incredible coalition and the popularity of solar that we're seeing.
I just have one follow-up, and that is that both Duke Energy and Florida Power and Light have parent companies that operate in other states, and certainly other states are pursuing this third-party initiative. Do you see any contradictions in how their parent company manages this issue in Florida versus how they've maybe handled it in others? I'm wondering if you can give us any examples if that's the case.
Well, I think that's what's interesting is in some of these other states where there are existing that already allows a more open solar policy, it's already there, right? So, you would have to go backwards. But if you look at a state like Florida, you have a captive rate base, and it's something that you always say. So, what business? I mean, look, if you look at it just from a standpoint of profitability, what business or what organization or institution that runs itself claiming to be a business, which has a monopoly, that doesn't get competition, which earns a large amount of money from that monopoly, would freely and willingly, I think, in Florida, potentially give up all of those profits without attempting to rig the game in a way that you move forward. So Florida, I think, is standing out as, in my opinion, very hypocritical for how things are being conducted, considering how other states are moving forward, and utilities have moved forward in some states with that as well.
Let me be very clear. In the Southeast, Duke Energy's home base is in North Carolina. North Carolina has over a gigawatt, meaning 1,000 megawatts of solar on the ground today and another 2 gigawatts in the pipeline. They are one of the fastest growing states in the United States for solar deployment. Now, that policy that drove that is different. It was what's called Renewable Energy Center. But Duke Energy actually supported that and was part of the deal that was done in North Carolina. Duke Energy in South Carolina, we were a party to an agreement with Duke Energy in South Carolina to advance solar in a positive way. Okay, so there's a precedent with Duke in other southeastern states to move forward, and they are reaping the economic benefits that come from solar power. Gulf Power in the Panhandle of Florida is an affiliate of Southern Company. Southern Company has agreed to and is moving forward on activities in Georgia. Georgia is on the trajectory to hit a gigawatt of solar power in the next 24 months. That is because they've adopted good policies. They are bringing economic development. Georgia was the second fastest growing solar market in the United States last year.
Now, is this utility controlled solar, or is this solar
It is
by
both.
third parties?
It's utility. It's
Florida will
utility.
Say, we've got a growing solar market here, but it's all utility controlled.
Utility side solar.
Yeah, but here's the reality. If you don't include the Martin concentrating solar facility, if you look at how much PV that is actually on the ground, it is approximately between 100 megawatts and 200 megawatts. It is a fraction of 10% of 1 gigawatt. And so while the utilities claim that they're committed to solar, they are not putting solar on the ground commensurate with the opportunity that Florida represents. And so that's part of what is motivating us. Now, have been big announcements over the past year, and over the next year, we'll see some more. But even if you add all those announcements up, you don't even get to a half of a gigawatt. You're not even half as close to North Carolina, and Florida is larger than North Carolina and has a better resource. So for the utilities to represent that they are accurately and encouraging solar is factually not based, not only in our region, but looking across the country.
Well, plus your point is so important because and it's the point that Steve raises is how long will we not have an honest public debate? And if we don't figure out how to have that honest public debate, we're going to wind up being decades behind not only the Southeast, but other states in the country whose economies are now being retrofitted to deal with this energy issue. And you know who's going to drive that? The private sector. In most of these other states where solar is emerging, it is the private business sector who are reaping some of the greatest benefits, and they're turning that around in jobs. So how long will we be held to this minimum standard of what solar can really be and what it can really do in the Sunshine State?
Well, and that was, of course, there's a real big difference between utility-size solar and then what you're talking about, giving individual homeowners the ability to enter into a contract with a solar company that can front the cost of it. As solar comes down and it becomes more affordable, obviously it's going to continue to benefit people. But the facts remain that you have to have other options, and you should have other options, because despite how affordable a car might be, you have large amounts of options on how to purchase it. You have options how to purchase your air conditioners, your water softeners, roofs. There are a lot of finance packages and mechanisms that are benefiting individual citizen consumers. We don't have that in Florida. There is a very big difference, especially consider we're one of just 4 states left, where we don't have that private sector finance-driven capability. And that is going to drive a large amount of solar forward. It's giving people more options to affordability on their personal homes and their personal businesses.
Other questions?
I have a question from a reporter on Periscope. Wants to know, do we know when the Supreme Court will rule on the Consumers for Smart Solar?
We don't know, but we anticipate it will be before April 1st, I think is what we anticipate. Is that consistent with what you understand, Bill or Bob?
Well, it's always just an educated guess. You don't know. I think that's as good as it is.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if they are knocked out in the Florida Supreme Court, remember all their signatures are invalid at that point, and they go back to square one. And so they are not in a position to tweak anything and then be available for 16. And if they want to try to put this thing back on in 18, they get to go back to go and don't get to collect any money. They're going to have to spend a lot of money to do it. And so in some ways, there will be sweet justice in seeing their $8 to $10 million deceptive campaign knocked out of the box. And that's what we're looking forward to. Any other
update on the PCI dispute? Is that in the courts or is that been resolved already?
It is in the courts. We have filed in Florida because we think that's the jurisdiction that needs to be happening, and we anticipate a quick resolution of that. And we think that those 200,000 or more signatures will be released in plenty of time for 2018.
Do you anticipate a jurisdiction fight on that lawsuit?
It's always a possibility because they're a California-based company, but we think we'll prevail for judicial efficiency. Is there any other questions? Thank you very much. We'll be happy to stick around and appreciate all y'all's interest in this.